Hi there, my name is Rafael and I welcome you to my farm training. Today we'll be starting our module number 2. I hope you enjoy the class and let's walk together during this unit. Let's start. So today we'll be talking about understanding compliance and voluntary carbon markets, and you're going to be using two different acronyms for both: CCM for compliance market and VCM for voluntary carbon market. Okay? And to follow up and to start this second class, I just want to share with you the objectives of this module, which are to present the concepts, actors, motivations, and interrelations between CCM and VCM, compliance carbon market and voluntary carbon market. To do so, we'll be highlighting how these mechanisms they drive global emission mitigation and promote the transition to a low carbon economy. Let's go to our first slide. What each market is and what is not. What does it mean as a CCM? What is VCM? So CCM, the compliance carbon market, is a type of a system called mandatory system established by the law. Okay? This is something enforced by the law, mainly at the European Union, where it has begun. It is a mandatory, and we do have the emission trading systems, and then we have another type which is called the carbon taxes, which I'll be exploring during this presentation. Okay? This is the CCM, and the difference is the VCM is a voluntary mechanism for financing emission reductions or removals. Okay? Remembering the difference of reductions and removals. Reduction is that myself as an industry, I emit 1,000. As a reduction, I'll be reducing from 1,000 something less than that. If I have a business and I want to remove a part of reducing I'll be removing from the atmosphere. So I'll be changing a technology that instead of emitting, it will actually remove, neutralize. My system of my industry will have stronger ties to environment if I try to remove gases. Okay? I do my homework, but I go beyond. And then when I go beyond, I remove. Okay? The key difference between the CCM and the VCM is that obligation for the compliance carbon market and choice for the voluntary. Okay? Let's go to our next slide. Which is the question, how compliance carbon markets, they do operate. Normally, they can act as a cap and trade systems. Just to explain what's cap and trade means that there is a limit of emission that a certain industry or organization can emit. Okay? So on top of that, if they emit more than this, what we call allowance, they must pay, so for the right to emit more, or they must to invest in a project or initiative or technology that will be limiting and decreasing the emissions. Okay? These carbon taxes, they set a price per ton of carbon dioxide emitted. One ton of carbon dioxide emitted means 1 credit. Okay? So you have the right to emit 100 ETS. If you emit more than that, you'll be asked to pay. Okay? And there is a price for you to pay, for a given business or organization to pay. Something interesting that both mechanisms, cap and trade and carbon taxes, they internalize cost of pollution. So to pollute, you gotta pay, and you gotta comply with the market and the rules of the market. Okay? Examples of compliance markets. The European Union emissions trade system is a cap and trade system covering heavy industry and maritime transport. Example, a heavy industry that builds concrete structures. They must have, at the end of the year, the report stating a valid report, a monitor report and validated report stating what they have emitted and how they have accomplished with the allowance, okay, they have had at the beginning of the year. Second example, California cap and trade extend to 2045, limited offsets allowed. In California, the cap and trade specifically for a given industry, a certain industry of example, cellulose industry, they can emit 2,000 tons of carbon dioxide. Okay, this is the top of. If they go beyond that, they must pay under the regulation of California, which is very specific. Okay, RGGI, a multi-state power sector initiative in the United States. So this is something that came up with the Article 16 of the Paris Agreement. Remember the 6.2 and the 6.4. So it's an interstate. So not just one state like the California, it is a multi-state that work to decrease the emissions from the industry sector. This is one example from the United States, very interesting. And the Australian Safeguard Mechanism, baseline and credit structure. I'll be exploring this later on this presentation. So, and it's always good to remind you that all these bullet points, they are well explained on the written document. Don't hesitate and access the document to dive deeper on that. Okay? Remember, I have mentioned the compliance market, now from the voluntary carbon market, the VCM market. The voluntary carbon market is crediting programs and registries. Key programs, Verra, you're going to be hearing a lot about Verra, and on the class number 3, I'll have a specific section of the presentation talking about Verra and showing you some figures from the Verra, okay? But nowadays, the current days, Verra, gold standard, and R3 are the top 3 in the world. Okay? Just for you to have an idea, around 80% of all the carbon credits allowed and emitted for agriculture and land management were emitted by Verra. So meaning that they concentrate over 80% of the emissions in the market. Okay? All of these voluntary carbon markets, they adopt monitoring, report, and verification to ensure credibility. Remember, I have touched bases on the previous presentation. To prove that what you're doing is actually realistic done, you must monitor, you must communicate by reporting it, and to certify and guarantee to society, to the buyers, that it's very valid and what you're talking about is true, must be verified through verification by an impartial and external third-party verification body or agent, okay? Other point here, pardon, credits issued and tracked through public registry. The next slide, I show you what means public registry, but for you to have an idea, whenever I issue a credit, I must advertise for the public good, for the public consultation, if this or that project is actually realistic. And this is the opportunity that the scientific community, the society, they can access this on the internet and read through the document and actually contribute with the document, or maybe correct if it's something wrong. This I have shared with you here. This is specifically for Verra. If you take a quick look, you will see that I have selected only projects in Italy, okay? You can see on the right figure, that's the first, second, third, the fourth column is a region. This is Europe. Specifically, the country on the second column is Italy. I have selected a few projects that are advertised on the Verra webpage. So this is all Italian cases. So you can actually, at this presentation, I have put the link so you can click on the link and you can go directly to see if you find any other project around your place. So this is a matter of curiosity. It will help you a lot understand what is a carbon project itself under registration. And if you take a quicker look to this here, you'll be able to see that on this column here, the second column, you see the name of the project, okay? On the third column, the project proponent, you may be acquainted with some of those guys. And on the fifth column, it's a project type. This is a very interesting. I have a pre-selected projects that are working with agriculture. And if you see the next column on the right, are full activities. Remember, I have mentioned agriculture, forestry, and land use change. It's a full. It's totally applicable to what we are doing here. Okay, carbon markets apply to agriculture. Okay, and if you see on the figure on the right-hand side on the first column, you see something very interesting and very special. We call it the status. If you see the first project, registration requested, so meaning that it has been evaluated for the public good. So international agencies that have evaluated, the society has evaluated, it has passed the public good and registration. So now they qualified for request, for registration request. The second line, you see a different status, is under validation, meaning that it has been evaluated for the public good, the registration request has been run, and now is under validation by the third party, okay? If you see the very bottom of this right-hand figure, still on the status column, you see rejected by administration. What does that mean? Mean that this project here, the project that's in Italy, which is the project number on the first column ID on the left-hand side, 3761, the olive groves for carbon farming, has been rejected by the administration. What does that mean? Probably it has not passed the public consultation, or maybe there is something wrong with the methodology adopted by. It doesn't mean that it will be canceled, because the company and the organizations, they can correct the trajectory and reapply, okay? So this is very important for you to see that are different phases that will qualify for different status. It's not just something that you apply and it will be granted. No, it passes a public good, it passes a technical registration, and etc. Okay? This I thought to bring for you. No, my idea was bringing it for you, so you can check and see that the things are realistic. Okay? Remembering, the link of these, specifically these screens, will be on the bottom of the page. You can click and access and just read it through. You'll be able to see what we call the PDD with the project document description, where it describes, it's a very extensive document that describes the project, and you get to learn a lot when you read those documents. Okay, this is a very practical knowledge. Getting back here, integrity upgrades in VCMs. What does that mean? Those two organizations here, ICVCM and VCMI, and those three, SBTI, they are all to keep the projects with high level of integrity, meaning that projects will be evaluated under strict procedures. They will be evaluated for third-party agents, and they will be evaluated by society. Meaning that you can go back on the page that I have just shown you, jump on that, read the document. If you find any inconsistency, you actually communicate. And how you do that? You do by one of those three organizations, ICVCM, VCMI, or SBTI. Okay? The difference amongst those. ICVCM is a core carbon principles, define high integrity credits. Okay? VCMI, it's a claiming code that provide corporate guidance and labels. The difference is it qualifies the project in different levels of integrity: silver, gold, and platinum, meaning different levels of impact and integrity. Okay, and SBTI, it's a science-based platform initiative. It goes beyond value chain mitigation principles, meaning that not just for carbon adjustment, but it's totally science-based. It embraces biology, embraces water, embraces soil health, and etc. So it tries to go beyond the carbon tunnel that I have mentioned before, goes beyond. I think it's a very valid for you to dive deeper in this section, because it will help you a lot understanding and defending the idea of a carbon market. It's not just a market itself, it has a clear procedures, and follows high levels of integrity. Okay? Regarding who are the CCM participants nowadays on the market currently, the CCM, the compliance carbon market participants, are mainly regulate entities like power utilities, industry, airlines, and etc. The other participants are the government and the regulators who set the caps, also set the limits of emission, are those that define the tax rates, how much will be for 1 ton emission. Someone must define that. And to define that, they must follow procedures. So these guys, they play an essential role on defining carbon rates, okay? And the other part of participant, government and regulator are the compliance and rules. So for you to do A, B, and C, you gotta follow the rules. And then you have the agents that will be setting up the rules. Like I mentioned before, normally we use a science-based target initiative. So the things that have been proved by science that actually works. It's not my opinion, not your opinion, not someone's opinion. It's a technical opinion of a body of professionals that define the right compliance, the right procedures, okay? And the last two players on the compliance carbon markets are the market intermediary. Who are these guys? They are traders. They are exchanges and financial platforms. First, traders. Who are the traders? People that trading, that negotiate the credit form. Example, you have a farm that produces olive oil and you got certificates. Okay, you already validated, you got the certification, you have the credit. So to put your credit on the market and make money of it, or say making financial assets, you can contact a trader who will help you to sell your credits on the right price on the right time, because the credits, they tend to vary over the weeks, over the days. They are like the stock markets, they vary, okay? So the traders are the agents that will help you trading those. Not just you as a farmer, but a company that has bought some credits and want to put on the market for commercialization, okay? Exchanges are companies that do the same, but with exchanging. And financial platforms, that's another way of applying. You can have a credit, you put on a platform like Kosher Climate, which is one of the European platform that's very strong, like a climate platform as well. So they put the credit there and the people go for the auction. Oh, I paid this amount, or I paid that amount, okay? These are the main players for the CCM. And then you have the players for the VCM, which are, pardon me, I just correcting my way here. The motivation of CCM, I gotta follow that up. The main motivation of CCM would be now we jump for the CCM motivations. What are the main motivations of compliance carbon market? Legal compliance and cost-effective emission reductions. So companies must be compliant with the law, and everything they do to create the credit must be cost-effective. It cannot cost more for me to reduce than to operate. That's why we have strict rules and motivations to do so. It must be good for both parties, for society and for the companies. The other motivations of compliance carbon market is invest in clean technologies. We understand that we improve, industry itself must improve, agriculture must improve, you know. And when we invest in clean technologies, we guarantee that a part of being more economically viable, sustainable, we are actually, as an industry, as a corporation, we are contributing with the environment. Remember the clean development mechanisms? This is one example. Clean technologies that deliver a same product with a less environmental footprint. This is one of the examples. Show up the commitment of the businesses towards the global agenda of sustainability, okay? And the third point of motivations can be the government revenue, a way of producing goods for the government, producing financial assets to the goods, and social programs. Governments can use those markets to push social programs. Example, creating financial assets to support the different social programs at the country level, okay? Just skipping to the VCM motivations, which are different than the compliance carbon markets motivation. The voluntary carbon markets, they have a different motivations. The first, mobilize additional climate finance beyond regulation. So it goes beyond the law, beyond the rules, beyond regulations. Mobilize additional climate finance to show that the industry, or maybe that corporation has more commitment towards sustainability. So it's a way of them to mobilize extra capital to make that happen and improve their marketing, communication, etc. The second motivation can be support high quality climate mitigations and removals. Can show again the commitment of this industry or that corporation on contributing with sustainability agenda. Okay. And the third, demonstrate corporate climate leadership and transparency. We understand that any company that are at the forefront of sustainability, they tend, normally nearly all of them, they tend to be on a leadership at the forefront of sustainability and transparency. When they do apply a project and get certified by the Voluntary Carbon Market, they show that they are an outlier. They are somewhere else, apart from the business as usual guys. So this sets them, put them on the scene on different location that they will be seen as a more committed company that will attract attention of investors that tend to invest on these types of businesses. Okay, this is a very important to share here. And then you start to understand that companies, they benefit a lot when they're applying for both VCM and CCM because they can see as a different commitment. Okay, now I share with you some more data regarding carbon pricing and trading mechanisms. And I mentioned some of the instruments and some of the core principles. Okay, next slide, just returning here, ETS and cap and trade instrument. The ETS we call emission trading system and cap and trade. What are these? They regulate, sets emission cap, allocates allowance, meaning that the emissions must be following rules of limiting emissions and they must comply with allowances. Okay, example, once a year, the government of Romania or the government of Spain, they set the allowance per industry. Look, your industry, you produce iron or quarry, you work with a quarry, you can emit this amount. So the allowance for this company is this. If you work on the dairy industry, you have a different allowance. So the ETS emission trading systems and both cap and trade, they regulate the emission cap, so the limit, and they allocate these allowances for the different industries, okay? Allowance traders on market, so these ETS systems say, look, for you to go to the market and have more allowances, we're going to be setting these allowances into a trading market, into a certain company, organization that will be organizing the trading and helping industry to get into the market and find the best price, find the best condition, and following up strict procedures to do so, okay? The third point is the price discovery through auctions and secondary trading. Again, the ETS, the emissions trading systems, they define the auctions, they define when the auctions will be happening, okay, and when the secondary trading will be happening. Because you have a different mechanisms of allocating allowances or making available the credits to the industries or corporations to get that, or to define the amount of credits. How does it happen? By auctions, where you go, industry goes and define the prices, or secondary trading, which can happen on the platforms. So you go to the platform, an electronic and digital platform, and once you access there, you see the prices, and then you can you can buy, second, following up what you are able to do under the procedures that the ETS has said, look, you must avoid emissions or you must mitigate this amount of tons, which will reflect in credits, 100 credits. Once you go to the secondary trading platform, you can check where to buy this amount of credits, this amounts of emission trading, amount to mitigate what you have emitted. So this ETS sets exactly how the auctions will happen, how the secondary trading platforms will operate, and before it, we'll define the allowance that will be allocated, okay? How many credits, how many carbon tons can this or that industry emit, okay? The second point, carbon taxes. Explaining what is carbon taxes are fixed prices per ton of carbon dioxide emitted. So these taxes come from a price that the market define, okay? These are very clear, like any other operations on stock markets. One example is South Africa. They can use the fixed price, the taxes. In South Africa, in this specific industry, they can use the carbon taxes that allows offset for up to 10% of the taxable emissions. Example, they are able to emit 10, but they have surpasses in 10%. So if they have produced their own offsets, they can neutralize that and use those 10% to neutralize the emissions. So at the end of the day, if they go up to 10%, they don't pay extra fee for that. If they go beyond, they pay, but they can discount up to 10%. It's a governmental incentive for industry to produce their own credits and use their own credits to deduct on the taxes, which is a very, very interesting. You see directly using of the resources to the industry. I think is a very interesting example, which you can explore on the written material, okay? Other thing about carbon taxes is a predictable price signal for long-term planning. Different than the other markets, the carbon taxes are fixed prices, so meaning that you can predict how many credits and how much that will cost on the long-term planning. Different than the other markets, example, the carbon and trading, the ETS, which will vary according to the market. The carbon taxes, they are fixed price, helps your industry, your corporation to plan. Example, I understand that I must get 100 credits on the market. How much that will cost? X. So I can internalize this price into my operations. That helps a lot, okay? Second point, the baseline and credit mechanisms. There is one of example called Australian Safeguard Mechanism. I'll explain further. Facilities below baseline generate tradable credits. What does that mean based on baseline and credit mechanisms? If you emit below the baseline, you generate tradable credits, meaning that you have some credit to put on the market. If you are able and are asked as the allowance of your region to emit 1,000, but you have emitted 900, you have a 100 credit, meaning that you can generate tradable credits, use the platform, and sell that on the market. On the other hand, if the facilities are above the baseline, you must, what we call, surrender ACCUs or ACMS. Those two are examples of Australian safeguard mechanisms. Back in Australia, if you generate less, you can sell. If you generate more, you got to surrender ACCS, meaning that you got to buy credit on the market or pay to the Australian carbon credit units, okay? Or buy from your neighbor who has SMCS, which is a baseline generated tradables, okay? It's very interesting, this example. Of the voluntary carbon credits, the projects quantified via methodologies and verified independently, As I have mentioned before, for your project to be qualified, it must be verified for a third-party impartial agent. That's why we call here independently verified. One carbon credit means 1 ton of carbon reduced or removed. If you take a quick look to here, you see 1 TCO2e. This little e means equivalent, because sometimes, nearly all the times, when you remove or decrease the emission of carbon, it's not just carbon that you emit. You decrease the water vapor emissions, you decrease methane emissions, decrease nitrogen dioxide emissions, okay? And these are all converted into carbon equivalent, okay? I'll touch bases on this technicality further on the third class, the third module of this training. But for you to understand, for 1 carbon dioxide, we have an equivalent of we have an equivalent of methane, have equivalent of water vapor, equivalent of N2O. So, and then you rule this equation, at the end of the day, you have 1 ton of carbon equivalent, okay? I'm gonna be showing you some equations later, as I mentioned in the third module. and you understand that. That both, getting back to the presentation, these credits can be reduced. So I normally emit 1,000, I reduce 10%, or can be removed. I remove from my operation that amount of emissions, okay? Which is different, reduced and removed. Other point important here, the voluntary credit markets, they ensure transparency and prevents double counting through registries. What does that mean, this expression, double counting? If my business, my company, is claiming 1,000 credits, which means 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, okay? 1,000 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, and I belong to a food chain, to a business chain, I will be the only one on the business chain that will be able to claim. If I claim as a dairy producer, the person and the company that sold me the fertilizer cannot claim the same credit as I have claimed. They must do another study by themselves with a different certification so they can claim that, to avoid what we call double counting. Okay? The registry, the registration guarantees that me and the other companies that belong to the chain of production of my business are not double counting things, not using the same credit twice. Okay, that's very important. Second point, another point which is very important about quality, integrity, and claims. High integrity credits must embrace additionality, permanence, leakage control, and monitoring, report, and verification. I explain each of those. Additionality, everything that I do now, that I do from now towards the future, must be improved regarding what I have done up to now. Cannot be business as usual, or cannot be my baseline. If I do one example, I do X, now once I apply my CCM or VCM, I must be 1 plus something percent. So must be additional, must be improved. Cannot be business as usual as I used to do, must be something improved. And must show permanence. I will not improve my technology on my industry just for the verification purposes. It must stay over time. That's why we need permanence. The improvements that I do must be kept, must be permanent. Okay? Leakage control. The technology example of leakage control, the technology that I am implementing in my industry, a part of improving my business as usual, so my past activities, as I explained, as additional, must not cause problems to my neighbor. So the technology that I use must help myself, it must be neutral to my neighbors. Otherwise, we have what we call the leakage. The problem goes from my place to somewhere. I cannot just transfer my problem. I must solve the problem and avoid problems to my neighbors or to the chain of custody. Okay? And MRV, that you know, monitor must be all the activities that I implement to improve and create additionality, permanence, and leakage control must be monitored. Must be reported, meaning that must be communicated and must be verified. You're going to be seeing that, you'll be noticed that MRV will be always present. You must monitor, report, and verify, guaranteeing that what I'm saying, what I'm doing, it's actually proof. Okay? Other important point regarding quality, integrity, and claims is the corporate use. Prioritize internal reductions before offsetting. What does that mean? The corporate use. As a corporation, I must reduce my own emissions within my industry, okay? Before I go outside and help the other actors of my chain of production decrease their own. So I start with my own place. I do my what we call insetting. So I decrease my own emissions and then I do offsetting, okay? Just examples, as I mentioned before, of frameworks, I see VCM, SBTI, and VCMI. These are all integrity mechanisms to keep the procedures clear, to keep the quality, to avoid leakage, to guarantee permanence, to guarantee additionality, and to put the right rules for monitoring, report, and verification. Okay? There is another slide here which is very important. And you could ask, but the compliance carbon markets meets the voluntary carbon markets. Does it intersect? It does. And how it intersects? Offsets allowed in some CCM. Example, California, South Africa, and Colombia. What does that mean? My voluntary carbon market generates offsets, okay? Because it's a voluntary, I do beyond my insetting, I go offset, so I improve my internal operations, but I go beyond. You know, I help the chain of production that belongs outside of my own operation. I mean offset credits. I generate offset credits. These offset credits can be used by the compliance carbon market. They can buy from us. Example, we produce the offsets under the voluntary carbon market and produce credits. The CCM, the compliance carbon market, can acquire that and count with them. So meaning that they are investing directly, but they are investing someone in the other project, in the region X, that are doing good. So they support those guys by buying credits and investing projects. One of these examples, 3 of those examples are California. California does this, South Africa projects, and Colombia as well. Okay? Another example where compliance carbon market meets the voluntary carbon market, intersects. The CORSIA. CORSIA is a certification for low carbon emissions or carbon neutralization used by the airlines. Okay? The airlines offset emissions using approved voluntary credits. One of the same cases. The CORSIA can invest in sustainable agriculture and land management projects to generate offsets and benefit from such a generation. Because the airlines themselves are very hard for them to inset their own emission on their own operation. They can improve the turbine functioning, they can improve the factory functioning, the water usage, the energy usage within the industry, but up to certain limit. Reaching this limit will be very hard for them to neutralize or mitigate 100%. Understanding that, the market allowed them to go outside and buy voluntary credits, which are offset. Okay? This is one example. You start to understand now that agriculture can contribute a lot with the other sectors. And this is very important. The industry of energy can improve a lot and can create credits. The factories, they can do so. But any of those different industry can do more than agriculture, because agriculture has the potential, because of the soil, of neutralizing and creating a lot of credits, because you can find a lot of room for improvements in the agriculture, specifically on developing countries, which are behind regarding the adoption of sustainable agricultural practices. Okay? So we're starting to understand now that agriculture is something very transversal, and the credits created by agriculture can be used by different industries. Just regarding, getting back to a presentation, regarding the intersect of CCM and VCM, the Article 6 enables international trading via ITMOs, international trading operations, under the Paris Agreement. Remember the Article 6, specifically the 6.2 and the 6.4. I have explained to you, and it's on our first module material. Meaning that you can getting together one state with another, one nation with another, working together to generate credits to move the market towards something more sustainable. And once they create credit in this country and that credit, that other country, they can exchange those credits, or maybe they can sum up these credits and use to mitigate. This has been allowed by the Article 6 Paris Agreement. Before the COP of Paris 2016, We were not allowed to do so. We have to do as a nation, as a single nation, or maybe as a state, as a single state. Now we can actually get in together and accomplish the decrease of emissions and the creation of carbon credits and negotiation of carbon credits between nations. Okay? Just as snapshot indicators for 2024 and 2025, 24% very new data. 24% of our global greenhouse gas emissions are covered by carbon pricing. Interesting, right? And the curve of growth is amazing. Around $104 billion in global carbon revenue in 2023. So this year, 2025, this number will be very bigger, way bigger. Okay? Take a quick look to that. Third, I want to explore with you some snapshots. Australia Safeguard Mechanism reformed, ICVCM and VCMI operational. One paragraph that must be read here. This is on a written material, but it's very good to read here so you can understand one of the snapshot of markets, which is very valid to mention here is the Australian 2023 Safeguard Mechanism reform, which has transformed the policy into a baseline and credit system to cut industrial emissions. Very interesting. Large facilities must stay below declining baselines, earning Safeguard Mechanism credits, SAMCS. I haven't mentioned quickly before, but now I'm just diving deep into this thing. If they emit less or using less Australian carbon credit units, ACCU, or SMCU to offset excess, okay? The reform enhances national decarbonization efforts and links domestic crediting with compliance flexibility. It's a very, very innovative mechanism. So they set the limits, but allows industries and corporations and companies to trade if they produce more or less, trading amongst themselves. You don't have to go to a highest sphere of decision-making, a highest arena. You can do it internally, which is very important and facilitates a lot. Australia is always at the forefront and they are very innovative. It's a good call reading the documents from ACCUs in Australia to learn a lot about what they've been doing. Okay? These are some of the references I have used, and I thank you once again very much for having attended this class. I hope I have clarified some of your questions. Don't hesitate and jump into the material that has been written to learn more. Once again, I am Rafael Araújo Bonatto. I'm a teacher. I'll be with you for the next two modules, the module 3 and 4, which will be longer than those two first modules because I'll be using more examples. I'll be diving deeper into the project, document, how to draft the project, how to register the project, how to understand it. But keep in mind that our goal here as my farm trainers is to allow you to understand more what's happening, update you with the most updated knowledge, and give you a glimpse of what's going on the ground and how you as a practitioner, you as a student, you as an academic can understand more about the markets. You can go to the market with more tools and instruments to be a project evaluator, a project verifier, or maybe become a project developer. Because the world is open, the world is just developing, and we need quality project on this area. Wish you a great time, and once again, thank you.